So Brother Joe Fordham was supposed to be speaking, or I should say, doing Sunday school this morning. He's out of town, so he asked me to fill in. He was only going to be away 1 week, which kind of presents a bit of a challenge, because now I'm supposed to come up with something that I can begin and end in 45 minutes. So what I thought I would do, rather than try to figure out where Joe was just come up with something totally brand new. And I thought, since I'm going to be teaching one of the teenage classes up at the Canadian Bible School this year, I thought I would just go ahead and share with you one of the classes I have planned for them. So it's an adult level type of class, so don't feel like this is something super elementary. In fact, it's a bit of an interesting and challenging and in-depth study, word study. So the theme of my class for the Canadian Bible School this year is going to be a Christian's relationship with the state. I have a PowerPoint presentation ready, but it may not be up here in time. So I'm just going to go ahead, since time is important here. I don't want to run out of time at the end of the class. So, a Christian's relationship with the state. Again, it seems like it would be a topic that adults would be interested in, but I think teenagers too would get something out of this, and that's what the hope is, to look at our relationship with the state as a follower of Jesus. Now, I'll give you a little bit of background as to why I chose this particular topic here. Some 15 years ago, I ran across a blog posting on the internet. It was written by a young man. I don't know his age. He was in that in-between stage of, he had gotten out of high school and he's trying to figure out what to do with his life. And he was in a little town which didn't really offer a whole lot of prospects as far as career opportunities. Things looked rather bleak for him. So he was kind of sharing his thoughts with the entire world. I don't remember how I stumbled across it, but it caught my attention because of what he was considering, and that was joining the military. At the time, I was doing quite a bit of research on this topic as far as Christians' relationship with the state, in particular with the military. And he was kind of like throwing it out there and like, I'd like to get feedback on this. So I decided to do a study. One of the things that triggered this was he made this observation, and he argued with himself. As someone who was familiar with the Bible, he realized that the sixth commandment created a bit of a problem or of a challenge for his possible career direction of joining the military. It's still coming up. And 15 years ago, plus or minus, the U.S. was in the middle of their quote-unquote war on terror. The U.S. would have been 2007 or so. We hadn't pulled out. So the U.S. was in Afghanistan and they were in Iraq. He realized if he joined the military, it was a pretty good chance he was going to find himself shipped overseas and probably participating in the warfare. So the sixth commandment comes from Exodus chapter 20, verse 13. And what I want you to do, everybody here, okay, no exceptions, because I want to do a poll, raising hands after this verse comes up on either your phone or in your Bible. Try to get caught up. All right, so Exodus 20, verse 13. What I want to do is look at that verse. Everybody open their Bible. And can I get somebody, Jesse, you got it? Yeah. Tell me what does your Bible say? Exodus 20, verse 13.
King James says, "Thou shalt not kill."
Okay, and thank you for adding the King James. So, the King James says, "Thou shalt not kill." Does anyone have anything different? Jason?
The DVD says, "Do not put anyone to death without cause."
Is that NIV or
BBE, that's the...
what is that?
I don't know what the... Bible
A
Basic
Bible and
English.
basic, okay, I should know that. Anyone have anything else? That's kind of like an odd man out, and we'll find out shortly that to be the case. Becky?
The NIV says, you shall not murder.
You shall not murder. All right, so we've got three different, does anyone have anything different? We've got kill, murder, and, what'd you say, put someone to death? Without a cause. Without a cause, okay. Anyone have anything different? Okay, so we're going to have a raising of hands, a poll here. Those whose Bible has some variation on you shall not kill or thou shalt not kill, with the word kill being the emphasis here, raise your hand if your Bible has that. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's 6 Bibles with kill being prohibited. All right. Those who have murder, raise your hand. Wow. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. All right, so that's almost 2 to 1. Murder over kill. I found that very interesting, and I didn't really think about this until I came across his blog posting. And he decided that it didn't pose any problem because he was using a modern translation. He was using thou shalt not murder. Now, what I wanted to do is look at the various translations, English translations over the last 350 years or so. And something, if you do that study, it becomes very interesting. Now, what you see on the screen, I'm starting in the year 1534. All right, and I'm going up to roughly the beginning of the 20th century, around 1900, 1890. And you will see, other than Tyndale's variation on how you spell kill, K-Y-L-L, you will see a consistent translation as you go through the years 1534, 1535, 1540, 1568, 1587, 1600, King James 1611, jumping into the 19th century, 1833, 1851, 1890, kill, 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 kill. Well, if you move forward in time, you're going to see something rather remarkable. With the exception of a republished King James version, they called the 21st century King James, and I guess it's kind of, you would expect that since they were just simply changing the these and thous. Everything here you see up within the last, 25 years or so? I guess it's going a little bit back, maybe 30, 35 years. You get murder, 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 murder. Now, what's going on with our Bible translations? Now, this is what kind of triggered my interest in this topic, with this particular study, word study, and I wanted to share this study with you because it really is interesting, and there's something going on behind the scenes that you wouldn't realize or you wouldn't recognize at first glance if all you do is use one translation and never look at another translation. So, how far back?
Yeah, the ones that said murder.
You mean the previous 1534?
No, the next slide, the murder ones.
Oh, I could go. I have dozens, like 4 dozen. I decided to give you just the end.
Yeah.
So what you'll see around 1890, 1900, it's kind of ironic, but there's a version called the Young's Literal Translation.
I was going to say, yeah.
He is the first one I could find that actually jumped from kill to murder, which is, by the end of the study, is going to be ironic because it's not a literal translation. At that time, around 1900, you start seeing, it becomes like a little bit of a leapfrog. You're going to find kill, and then 5 years later, murder. And then 5 years later, next translation, kill. And then 10 years later, murder. And then 10 years later, kill. up to the RSV, the Revised Standard Version, which I think came out around 1950-ish, you will have kill. And then, like after 1950, you're going to find murder, 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 occasionally a kill, murder, 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 a kill, murder, 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 until you get to this. So it doesn't just, light switch turn on and off at a particular time, but there is this change. Within 350 years, you've got a different version or a different word being used to render what's being prohibited in the Sixth Commandment. I don't know if that answered your question. Did you? Yeah, the new Revised Standard Version, they switched it. So, I find it interesting. I don't know about you. All right, so let me try to catch up here. So what I want to do is ask the question, what is the difference? Is there any difference? What's the difference between killing and murder?
Well, if you kill a mosquito that bites you, that's killing. If you kill a human being, that's murder. So the target
If I kill a human being, it's murder?
Yes.
Okay, so if I'm out chopping wood and you're out there helping me gather the wood and my axe flies out of my handle and I hit you in the head and you die, I just murdered you?
It's the intent. You intend to kill someone. To kill a person is murder.
Okay, now you're adding something about intent. So we're adding something to the act of killing is the intention. Okay. Does anyone want to add to that? Becky?
For it to be murder, it also has to have a component of not being self-defense, that you did it without a good reason, basically.
So if it's in self-defense, it's not murder, is what you're saying?
That's what I would say.
Okay. I've got a lot of hands. Jacob, you're going to have to do some running around.
Murder removes justice from the equation. Killing has justice involved in it, or there are portions of the law that require you to kill.
So killing has justice involved?
There is justice or righteousness that can be associated with killing that is not associated with murder.
Okay.
So in order to stone somebody, you will kill them, and there is justice involved there, but that is not murder.
Okay. We got Daryl, I think.
I'm just the information, and it might tie in with what you're saying, but the exact same word is used 16 times as slayer, 14 times as murderer, 5 times as kill, 3 times as murder, 3 times as slain, manslaughter twice, killing once, slayer once, slayeth, and death. So to kill, to slay, to murder, to premeditated, accidental, as avenger, slaying is the definition of that same word.
Are you reading from something?
Strong's.
Okay. Well, okay, strong has merit, but I wouldn't consider that the final word. It's interesting. I thank you for your addition there. Lee?
Well, I also took a look at the instances where the same Hebrew word occurs, and it appears that a lot of times it is used for murder or murderer or slayer or slay, and it can refer to an accidental killing of your neighbor or an intentional killing of your neighbor, because this is why the cities of refuge were put in place, because sometimes there was an accidental, an axe handle flew off and killed somebody or whatever, So there's a difference between this kind of a killing and, I think, when God tells you to kill someone for the purpose of, as Jason said, fulfilling God's justice in a matter.
So let me just interrupt because I don't want this could definitely go on forever. let me point out that no one here has pointed out that we're arguing over English words, okay? If you go back to the Hebrew, you're not going to have this argument, okay? I think Walter had some, again, I need to kind of speed this up because I'm going to be running out of time.
I was waiting for you to make the point that you have not defined these words from a reliable source, so I don't know if I'm comparing apples, oranges, or what together. Without knowing which words you're using here, it's kind of hard to make the right decision.
Okay, so that's the point I'm trying to get at, is we really shouldn't be looking at the English, we should be looking at the original language, okay? Because you have translators making decisions based upon original, either Greek or Hebrew, in this case Hebrew. Now, one thing I want to point out on this question about killing and murder, if you're looking at it from a societal standpoint, what determines murder versus killing happens to be laws. Laws that are enacted by humans, not by God. Now, let me give you an example. I don't know, I can't remember if it was yesterday or just within this past week, marks the first anniversary of the overturning of Roe versus Wade, which means now that in certain states, it's illegal to perform an abortion. But in other states, it's perfectly legal. Now, in the US, it's illegal to euthanize an individual. If you go to Europe, I'm trying to think, I think Belgium, it's legal to euthanize another individual. So what we're doing here is determining what's murder based upon man's laws. And as you can see, depending upon what state or what country you're in, what's murder in one place is not murder in another place. Okay, so that's one thing I want to get across clearly when we're talking about English terms, killing and murder. Jesse?
U.S., they do euthanize people, they just don't call it that.
Yeah, but if you remember, Dr. Death, Mr. Jack Kevorkian, was actually prosecuted for murder when he ended the life of some elderly, terminal individual. It was murder, the charge that was brought against him. So again,
we just do it differently here. We just sedate them and withdraw water in 3 days.
Yeah, I know, but that was an intentional act there. Yeah.
It's very intentional when you stop giving water to someone who's unconscious. Anyways.
Okay. So I wanted to move forward. What I wanted to do, why this is important is that this gentleman, the young man who I came across, he used this argument to justify why he should join the military as a Christian and why he would not have any problem. He said the Bible, in one of its many translations, reads, "Thou shalt not murder," the key word being murder, not kill. If it was truly "thou shalt not kill," then any man who slaughtered an animal to feed his family would be condemned. Okay, so by choosing to understand the sixth commandment as prohibiting murder rather than killing, this young man felt he could, in good conscience, join the military because in his mind, soldiers, of course, don't murder, soldiers only kill. So by having this word murder used in the sixth commandment, there is this opportunity to, I guess, Christians could justify what they're doing by joining the military and say, I'm not breaking any commandment of God. So we're going to look into that particular argument by looking at the Hebrew. And this is what you really should be doing if you're going to, avoid the endless debate about the English words. If we go back to the Hebrew, we're going to find one word, ratzak, in Exodus 20:13. So you essentially have, "Thou shalt not ratzak." The question is, what does ratzak mean? I think this is what Walter is trying to get at. So we were not comparing apples and oranges. Let's go back to the original Hebrew. Now, this word, ratzak, occurs 47 times in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Scriptures. And if you start looking at every single instance, you're going to see, and I think Darrell was pointing this out, you're going to find variation in the translation. Now, Strong is probably basing his conclusions upon probably the King James, the authorized version. Daryl?
Sorry, I didn't finish what I was saying earlier because I forgot. But the problem with me doing Strong's, like you said, is that all Bibles are translated. And so the only thing we can do is go through and look at all the verses in the Bible. Because look at, Gideon killed, but God told him to, but then there's Israelites that went out to war when they weren't supposed to, and they were punished. Right, so they did it without God's authority. And so I guess we just have to look at how the strings through the Bible, how, that's what I was going to add earlier and I forgot.
Okay, so Ratzak, let's get back to Ratzak. This is what you find in Exodus 20:13 on the sixth commandment, thou shalt not Ratzak. 47 times this word occurs in the Old Testament. Almost half of the time they occur associated with the cities of refuge. And if you remember, and this occurs mostly in the book of Numbers, but you'll also find it referenced in Deuteronomy and also in Joshua. There were 6 cities of refuge that were set aside in the land that God gave to the Israelites. And they were to provide temporary asylum for those who were found, we'll call it right now, guilty of manslaughter. We're not going to use the word murder. If two individuals somehow were involved in some type of scuffle and one person died, the killer, we'll use the word killer here, was supposed to flee to the nearest city of refuge. What was supposed to happen there was that the judges, the elders, were supposed to look into the matter and make a decision as to whether the slayer, the killer, and this gets into the intent, had previously had, let's say ill feelings or something that tipped off that this was not an accident, that this was not just me out there cutting wood and I let go of the axe and whack Jesse in the forehead. They make the determination between what you would call, premeditated versus accidental or unpremeditated, if that's even a term. Jesse?
Example, if this just happened, axe head flew off and killed someone, is one thing. If you tampered with the axe and practiced for a month so you could hit what you're aiming at and used it to throw the same axe, it's the same accident, but it's not an accident.
So I was staging it, yeah. And if maybe my axe hand or my axe head, you could see I had it, with duct tape, I was aware that that axe head was going to and had flown off in the past. It is a little bit different when the axe head flies off the handle and hits Jesse in the forehead. The point being is that there was going to be a judgment made based upon past history and interactions between the parties, and a decision was going to be made. So half the time that this word occurs in the Old Testament, it's in the context of the cities of refuge and this action of determining guilt or innocence. Now, if we turn to Numbers 35, I'm probably going to read this for the sake of time, but what I've done, if you look at the underscored, bold-faced, yellowed words, this is the word ratzak, all right? Now, you're going to see it consistently. This happens to be the Revised Standard Version. And you'll notice as we move on, something funny is going to happen here. But right now, for this particular passage, it's consistent. Ratzak is being translated by the RSV as murderer, 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 murderer. So I'm going to read this here quickly. These 6 cities shall be for a refuge for the people of Israel and for the stranger and for the sojourner among them, that anyone who kills any person without any intent may flee there. But if he struck him down with an instrument of iron so that he died, he is a murderer. The murderer shall be put to death. And if he struck him down with a stone in the hand by which a man may die, and he died, he is a murderer. The murderer shall be put to death. Or if he struck him down with a weapon of wood in the hand by which a man died, and he died, he is a murderer. The murderer shall be put to death. The avenger of blood shall himself put the murderer to death when he meets him, he shall put him to death. And if he stabbed him from hatred or hurled at him, lying in wait so that he died, or in enmity struck him down with the hand so that he died, then he who struck the blow shall be put to death. He is a murderer. The avenger of blood shall put the murderer to death when he meets him. All right, so this seems pretty straightforward, except for one thing. You know, these laws don't take into consideration the possibility that these acts were either accidental or self-defense. And if we continue reading, though, we'll see the provision made for that situation. So continuing in verse 22, same RSV version. And notice what happens, though. Again, the yellow, I guess we only have one instance there. Notice what happened. It's the same Hebrew word, but look what happens now in this translation. But if he stabbed him suddenly without enmity, or hurled anything on him without lying in wait, or used a stone by which a man may die, or without seeing him cast it upon him so that he died, though he was not his enemy and did not seek his harm, then the congregation shall judge between the manslayer and the avenger of blood in accordance with these ordinances. And the congregation shall rescue the Ratsaker, in this case it's being translated as manslayer, from the hand of the avenger of blood. And the congregation shall restore to him to his city of refuge to which he had fled, and he shall live in it until the death of the high priest who was anointed with the holy oil. So we see that there are exceptions in cases where there was no malice on the part of the one who killed the other person. In such cases, the one who did the killing would be told to stay within the city of refuge until the death of the high priest. That way, he would avoid being subject of himself being killed by the avenger of blood. Now, we're going to continue this in Numbers 35, and this is where things get wild. Verses 26 and 27. And note these verses carefully and think about this. But if the manslayer, the Ratsaker, shall at any time go beyond the bounds of his city of refuge, which he fled. In other words, the person who had no malice toward the person he slew, if that person who is found, so to speak, innocent, if he leaves the city of refuge at any time prior to the death of the high priest, and the avenger of blood finds him outside the bounds of the city of refuge, the avenger of blood slays Ratsak, the Ratsaker. He shall not be guilty of blood. Okay, so now think about this. The avenger of blood, your relative, okay? He notices that the person who killed his brother accidentally and declared innocent of any premeditation, he is allowed to Ratsak the person who killed his brother. These are all the same words in Hebrew. For the premeditated act, for the unpremeditated act, and for the avenger of blood who just simply gets an opportunity to kind of, make him feel better because he still has hatred toward the person who took his brother's life. These are all the same Hebrew words. Now, if you were to take and say, every time Ratsak occurs, you translate it as murder, you're going to have some really crazy things going on here. Because essentially then you end up with the brother murdering the innocent person who didn't murder. It was just an accident. My axe hit him in the head. This is why the term murder is inappropriate as a default for Ratsak. The term Ratsak should better be translated as simply taking the life of a human being. Now, based upon the context, then, you can make little distinctions, but even then, if you're going to use English words, you're going to run into the problem that in society, in English society, in any society, the words are going to be based upon how you understand them. It's going to be based upon the laws of the country. Again, getting back into abortion, euthanasia. This is one of the problems with the translators using murder, which is a much more narrower understanding of kill, in the prohibition of the Sixth Commandment. So what I'm going to do here is just kind of summarize what I've just gone over. The Hebrew word ratzak has been used in Numbers 35 to describe all of the following: the act of premeditation and the person who performs a premeditated killing of another person, the person who kills in self-defense, or you could say by accident, and 3, the act of the avenger of blood that he performs against the person, I guess you could say number 2. That is also described as ratzak. And again, to get the point home, murder would be inappropriate. Even though it's the same word throughout, in all 3 cases, murder does not work as a default translation for ratzak. So when I did this study, I was kind of like scratching my head. Okay, that's good, that's all great, but how did we get to the point where almost every translation in the last 35 years is now murder? I mean, what I just shared with you isn't really, a secret. I mean, it's not that difficult to do a word study. And yet, we find this situation. Now, there are a handful of translations that in the Sixth Commandment in Exodus 20:13 do use kill, but they are the odd man out. Some of the more modern ones would be the New Life Bible, the New American Bible, and the New Jerusalem Bible. And I guess if you want to call 1969 modern, I mean, relative compared to the 14th or 15th century, it is. I did find this interesting. So you know how often translations get updated or revised? Well, the New Jerusalem Bible, which in 1985 said thou shalt not kill for Exodus 20:13, it underwent a revision in 2019, and look what they changed. They flipped it from kill to murder. And this is the trend. And the question, though, is why? We haven't really answered that question. We've kind of looked at what's going on from the Hebrew text, but we're not understanding why is this happening. So I wasn't the only one who was intrigued by this question. Back in 2005, a scholar by the name of Wilma Ann Bailey published a book titled, well, it's not very original, but it gets to the point, You Shall Not Kill or You Shall Not Murder, the Assault on a Biblical Text. And in her book, she covers this topic in painstaking detail. If you think I'm going into detail, you need to read the book. But you really do if you want to know what's going on. And what she does beyond just simply like taking you where I have this morning, look at the Hebrew occasions, and you really should, if you're going to do a serious study on this, you need to go through every 47 verses or instances where you find ratzak, so you have a comprehensive understanding of the word. And she does that, and I recommend it, but for the sake of time, we're not going to do that. But one thing she also does in this book, beyond just doing the word study, she asks the question, why are the translations, the modern translations, leaving kill behind and preferring murder? That is something which I was myself wanting to understand. And this particular section in her book I want to share with you, it's titled, or the section's titled, Evangelicals, the Military, and the Sixth Commandment. So reading from her book here, it says, Anne C. Loveland has done the most complete research available into the relationship between evangelicals, that's evangelical Christians, and the military during the second half of the 20th century. According to Loveland, evangelicals started to become heavily involved in the military after the Second World War. Evangelicals noticed that young men returning from military service had picked up negative behavior such as drinking, cursing, and sexual promiscuity. These churches saw the military as a mission field, and they wanted to provide wholesome influences and wholesome leisure activities for the servicemen and women. They encouraged evangelical clergy to become chaplains, Ranking officers who proclaimed Christian faith became celebrities in evangelical circles. Since killing is at least a potential occupation of military personnel, how did evangelicals square that with their faith? Loveland notes that for many evangelicals, killing the enemy in combat was not murder, and therefore did not violate the sixth commandment. And this particular section in the book, it ends with, I'm going to jump ahead kind of to the conclusion that they came to. The melding of evangelicalism, patriotism, and militarism was one factor that led to the easy acceptance of the change in the translation of the sixth commandment. Now, would you know that if you were reading, how many of the 12 people or so that raised their hands with murder in the sixth commandment, how many people would have thought that could perhaps be what's going on behind the scenes? You know, it's a very interesting observation. I'm not sure I'm totally sold or convinced, because if you actually do a thorough comparison of the English translations, you actually see the shift occur prior to World War II. It was closer to, I guess, when the U.S. started to become more militaristic with the Roosevelt era, the Spanish-American War. Basically, at that point, you start to see the switch to murder. Okay, I think she's on the right trail. I think it's a little bit earlier. Jesse?
The fact that it's a thou shalt, it implies quite specifically that it's something that you have the choice to decide to do or not to do. And it applies to those circumstances. There's not a commandment that says thou shalt not obey gravity, because you have no choice. It's unpreventable, it's gonna happen. And if you're not actively having intent to kill someone, it's just an accident, you can't follow a thou shalt. It just happened.
Mike?
Comment with just reading "You shall not murder" in the modern text. My interpretation of this before this was more so separating in English between killing a person and killing an animal. There's like in English, you could kill a bear or you could kill a person. So I wondered if Raksa, was that always used person to person, or was it?
It's never used in the context of animals.
Okay,
It's
that's
never used
helpful.
for sacrifice. In fact, the only time it occurs close to an animal, and it's funny, in Proverbs, there's one that says, like, the slothful man says, there's a lion in the street. I'm not going to go out because I could be Ratsak. Which is funny because usually you don't think of lions committing murder, all right? That's the only place where you're going to find Ratsak anywhere near an animal. And in that case, it's kind of, again, no one's going to think that a lion can commit murder.
I was wondering if in the last 2.5 minutes you were going to bring up the other Hebrew word that's used more widely than raksak for kill or slay, or it's also translated die. And it's funny because, to me at first I was thinking, oh, maybe it's like sanctioned by God versus not.
Well, we're going to go into that.
But it also
what
seems to be
happens
used
if
for
we
murder.
go back to the old version of using kill? What problem does that raise? I wanted to look into that. I don't know.
Have you ever looked into whether other languages, French, Spanish, whatever, all the different translations around the same time, do they have a similar switch from, into murder more than kill?
Well, in the first 100, whatever, from 1534 to
Right,
1900 is consistent, kill. Pretty much 90% of the English translations in the last 50 years is murder. In between, from 1900 to about 1960, you're going to see a flip-flop. It's going to, like, one translation will say kill, and then you go to a different translation will say murder. I mean, English translations are coming out like almost every other year.
But what I'm asking, this particular author seems to be focused on American translations.
It's
and
looking
I'm
at
wonder-
English. Yeah, it's an English
Okay,
examination.
But there are lots of other biblical translations, and I'm just wondering, because, anyway, okay, never mind.
Yeah, I can't tell you what's going on in French or Spanish, okay? All I'm doing is here as Americans looking at the question of can Christians go to war and argue that the Sixth Commandment doesn't prohibit it? That's really what I'm looking at. So if you're a true seeker of truth and you really want to do a thorough Bible study, what you need to do, one thing we should learn from this whole thing is you should not stick to just one Bible translation. You should try to look at multiple translations, and that way you would find out some of these, you can call them discoveries. And I'm going to put in at this point a rather shameless plug. It may sound difficult to do, but actually there's this app, which I'm going to try to promote here, called Inward. I don't see how it's actually doing it already. So it only takes about 2 taps on any particular verse, and you can get up to 4 different translations for that one particular verse. Now that doesn't have Exodus 20:13 up there, but nonetheless, the point is, you can today very easily make comparisons between Bible translations. And I suggest, if you're doing any type of serious Bible study on any perhaps verse of controversy, you should be looking at multiple translations. Don't stick with your one translation. If you're a teacher, you're going to find yourself embarrassed really quickly if all you do is use the same version and never look at another version. So, end of shameless plug. So I think I pointed this out. New Jerusalem Bible in 1885 had "Thou shalt not kill," and then it switched. So the question then becomes: is there a problem with using "kill" in the Sixth Commandment? Thou shalt not kill. What problem does that raise? Well, one of the problems it raises is God commands his children on occasion to kill. And I think it's the 4th commandment, thou shalt keep the Sabbath holy. Well, what was the penalty, the punishment for a Sabbath breaker? They were supposed to be killed. Now, let's say you lived 3,500 years ago, and Becky, you're out fetching firewood for breakfast, okay? You're not supposed to be fetching firewood on the Sabbath, Becky. One thing you should point out, today is not the Sabbath. But if it was the Sabbath and someone caught you, they could point you out to the elders, and you're going to be in deep water. If you're found guilty of breaking the Sabbath, you're going to get stoned. You're going to get killed. Now, can Becky, as she's about to get the first stone hurled at her, can she say, hold on, you can't do that? Because the 6th commandment says, you shall not kill. Can she do that? Why? Well, there's an overriding commandment that God has put into place that the Sabbath breaker was to be put to death. You cannot override a command of God with another command of God. That would explain why the children of Israel could go out and kill the Amorite, the Hittite, the Jebusite, and all the otherites. You know, the soldier can't say, hold on, God, you told us we're not supposed to kill, so I'm putting down my sword, and you're going to have to work this out yourself. Send a thunderbolt, send lightning, whatever. Get rid of them yourself. I'm not doing it because you just told us we're not supposed to kill. No, that doesn't work. God is not going to contradict himself. So if we were to use kill for the 6th commandment, and you're consistent and not cherry-picking your verses, you're not going to have a problem with that particular occasion. You're not going to be able to have the adulterer say, you can't kill me because the 6th commandment prohibits it. No, it doesn't work that way. So I don't know if that answered maybe where you're going with, or someone was asking about the problem with using kill for the default translation. Leah?
Just real quick, it just seems like to me that what's being emphasized here in the scripture is the first commandment, which is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And then the second in its place is like into it, love your neighbor as yourself. So, God's laws about loving him above everything else, those are the overriding laws, even over and above loving your neighbor, as far as killing your neighbor.
Right,
God's laws he must be honored first,
right.
and then love for neighbor comes second.
One thing I probably should do quickly is when we're looking at the sixth commandment, thou shalt not kill, we've been focusing on the kill element or the ratzak element. I really think it should be the you element. You shall not kill. In other words, you are not the one to be making the decision to take another person's life. Sorry, I'll try to get in. If God commands us to kill, we're not supposed to say, God, you told us not to kill. The sixth commandment prohibits it. There may come a day when we are told to pick up the sword. If we are to be like unto the angels, and remember Balaam, the angel came out with a sword, and he was going to kill Balaam. We may be, at some point in the age to come, told to pick up the sword and to kill. The point being, we were told by Jesus to put the sword away. And until he tells us otherwise, we are not supposed to kill. So you could say this is more a focus on the you element of the sixth commandment, not the ratzak, kill/murder debate. It is not supposed to be us making the decision, but rather God. And we are to wait for Jesus' return and wait for the captain of our salvation to make that decision if we are to continue or to pick up the sword at any point in the future. So I didn't finish the exhortation or the Bible study. Hopefully you'll kind of get an idea of what I'm trying to get across as far as Christians' relationship with the state. We need to be very careful. And with that, I think we'll turn it back to Mike. So thank you for your attention.